thank you so much for coming, and apologies for confusion on the time, and congratulations, you made it. This is a wonderful thing about Davos. It's fluid and flexible. I always tell my children the secret to life is to be flexible and keep your sense of humor. And so here we are. My name is Catherine Carlton. I'm the former mayor of the city of Menlo Park in Silicon Valley. And then I retired from politics. It's always good to retire voluntarily when people say, no, stay. And I'm doing my doctorate now. I've just finished my doctorate on trust and how to facilitate trust when people work remotely. And that applies to leadership working remotely. And a lot of boards are remote, international boards, and many times haven't even met in person, which really does impact. Our research has shown that just meeting for an hour over coffee even will fast track that relationship so that your brain says when you call remotely, oh, I remember her, she was great. And the amygdala calms down, prefrontal cortex charges in, and you have not only better communication, but that the oxytocin and the neurotransmitters that help you on the trust level flow that much better. And they're the triple bottom line of trust, because we're talking a lot about trust this week. Higher levels of trust, working in higher quartiles of trust, not only produce better decisions that make benefits, financial and otherwise, for the corporations. When you're working in a higher trust environment, it physically benefits you as well. You have better outcomes for inflammation, for diabetes, for cancer, for heart disease. It then flows out into, if you're working in higher quartiles of trust, you're happier with your marriage, your children, you function better, and therefore it benefits individuals, it benefits the corporation, and then it benefits the community. And those benefits are highly investigated and reported in the Edelman Trust Report, which, if you haven't read that, it just came out on Monday, the new one for this year. And it's really fascinating to see how trust integrates in with even foreign direct investment and crime in the communities. So as we move forward on this, I'm so happy to have everyone here. Would you like to take a minute or two to introduce yourselves as we come through?
Yes. Hi, I'm Sandy Carter. Oh, it has to be turned on. Sorry. Hello. Okay, good. Okay, hi, I'm Sandy Carter. So from a board perspective, I was on the board of a company called Altair AI. It was on NASDAQ in the U.S. We actually just sold it to Siemens for $11 billion. And so I'll be rolling off of that board, hopefully onto a new board. But I'm also the chief business officer for a startup. I am the chair of the applied AI group at the Digital Economist. If you don't know it, we do a lot of research papers and that sort of thing. And I founded the Unstoppable Women of AI and Web3. We had a beautiful breakfast this morning with about 120 women. So excited to be here and be on this panel.
Yeah, good. Hello, nice to meet every one of you. My name is Dr. Friedrich. I'm a physician and also scientist by training, Harvard faculty. I'm also on the board of Equiterra Institute, which is a think tank and an NGO. And I have experience in 3 boards. The 2 other boards that I've worked a lot with are the Council of the German-American Conference at Harvard, and then the BMAP, which is a transatlantic scholars program of about 800 people that are attempting to tackle some of the most pressing issues of society. Of course, you can only do so much, but some of the topics spanned are healthcare, the media, politics, and of course also the entrepreneurial world. I do have a startup myself. It's called Physician Pathways USA. It's an educational startup that tries to help physicians elevate what they are doing so they don't have to reinvent the wheel. And trust is certainly, being a physician, trust is certainly of the essence in my everyday work, being dynamic and trying to mitigate all those different influences we can maybe elaborate on a little later. Nice to meet everyone.
What am I not doing right? Hi there, I'm Laura Ann Edwards, and since we're in this blended panel, yes, I have been on a board. I spent many years in media tech, in particular the explosion of cable networks in the United States and taking them into full digital 360 media. And so within that same period of time, I worked my way on to the largest association of independent filmmakers. So it was a long, lovely, challenging nonprofit board. And I've advised a number of other particularly arts-oriented nonprofit boards. These days, my life has come full circle back around to environmental tech. I won't even say just green tech, but environmental tech. And I'm particularly fascinated on the cross-pollination between sectors, so like space and climate, mining and space, things like that. I've just started a new venture called Geospace Resources, very specifically about mining and space tech. And yes, I have a lot to say on what I think leadership is and what gets left out of most conversations. So I look forward to our dialogue.
I think it's working. Hello, everyone. My name is Marlene. I am a dispute resolution lawyer, also board member in many different companies from the infrastructure and non-profit organization. I founded two non-profit organizations, one regarding women leadership and another very young one regarding the Hispanic world, in order to push to have a unified voice. I love innovation, and I'm in charge of all that relies with artificial intelligence from the law perspective in our law firm and advising clients in that field. And I love to have this conversation because I think the three words, technology, geopolitics, and uncertainty, has a lot to do with the world that we live today. And we are like having to use those words all the time, every day. And what really connects me is the power of dialogue. I am an international mediator, also president of the Ibero-American Chamber of Mediation Commerce and the Madrid Chamber of Commerce. And that's why the main theme of this with the spirit of dialogue, I think it's more important than never before, due to the situation that we are living today in the world and in the boards.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Kayvon Pimani. I actually agree with my fellow panelists. I was really excited to see that this was a topic that was going to be covered here. I've had a kind of multivariate career, as most people on this stage have also had. The pleasure of being the chairman of a NASDAQ board for several years, also serve on a number of nonprofit boards, as well as private company boards. As an investor, I've invested in 85 different startups. Certainly, as a business executive, have seen kind of the challenges in between the regulatory environment. I do wear a hat as the chief strategy officer of Animoca Brands, which is one of the big Web3 companies, and we're also looking to go public on the NASDAQ later this year. And so the idea of regulation, the idea of leadership, the idea of global technology shifts is both near and dear to me as an investor, but also as a business operator. So looking forward to learning from my fellow panelists, obviously looking forward to learning from all of you as well once we have a chance to chat. So it's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. Sorry to be late, by the way, but there was some glitch. Thank you. Happy to be here, and happy to be in a gender-balanced panel. Congratulations. It's my wife forbid me, but I didn't know in advance, to be honest, to be a part of any non-gender balanced panels. My name is Philip van Kanegem. My career is relevant to this, a mix of entrepreneurship through the form of technology startups, 3 in particular, one in the earlier days of AI, not the very early days because that was 80 years ago and I'm not that old. Also been a management consultant, accompanying top management, also boards, on strategy, how to innovate, how to pivot, and an operator. I was at Salesforce, where I ran strategic innovation, and now I'm an investor, both an LP and a fund, private equity, buy and build. So happy to be here. Thank you, Kat.
Thank you. I'm glad everyone could join us. When we talk about trust, we were talking about trust earlier, they talk about the 4 C's. The first is capability. Are you able to do it? The next is consistency. Are you able to do it reliably? The next is communication. Is there transparency? Can people see that you're doing it? And the last, interestingly, is character. And you'd think ability or consistency would be the most critical, but actually character. Why are you doing it? Are you doing it for your own good? Are you doing it for nefarious reasons? Are you doing it to save the world? And one of the interesting things that indicates character is how you deal with dynamic tension. You know, do you want to have predictions and things that are based on good data, or adaptive learning? Do you want to have centralized information or distributed that can maybe highlight things that you would have missed otherwise? Do you want people in leadership who have been there for decades and they know their stuff and they're solid? Or do you want young people that might have younger, different ideas? These things pull apart and yet build character that we see in leadership. And I was wondering...
Or not so young, but lateraling. No, I mean that seriously. There's so many skilled people that should be going right in at a mid to upper level at companies, but no, they only want the 27-year-old, because why, I don't know, but they do.
Absolutely. So how do you handle these dynamic tensions that we're struggling with? Because that's kind of the key issues that we're dealing with right now. That's the foundation.
Okay, right away into it. So yeah, to bring it back to the changing world, because that's, I mean, to put it in the bigger frame, it's clear that there's an acceleration of change on all topics. So I was trained in foresight by somebody who kind of wrote the Bible on it, Peter Schwartz. And for the longest time, we saw clearly which kind of building blocks we would use, and then build a couple of scenarios, see what is most likely, and then start from there, right? What if you know more or less if you have the map of the territory, you have a better idea of how you can navigate the map, right? And that then has an impact on your choices, on the board, on leadership, who you want where, when, for how long, etc. That's now all thrown up. You have to almost start from geopolitics. And that's something pretty new. And then, as we've seen with announcements, it's just accelerating I would say, the valley of unlikely, not knowing what's going to come tomorrow, right? But you have to deal with that, leadership. You do have to make choices, and you can be wrong. So one of the first things is you need to build in a sensing thing. What if we were wrong? And how fast can you change that? I kind of like the Amazon approach of saying, let's look at any decision from how hard is this to undo this decision? Is this irreversible or reversible type of decision? And taking things from there. And I think that's more relevant than ever today. And then I'll actually pass on.
Okay, awesome. So, what I think about in the changing environment is we just did a survey, and we were looking at reasons why people are moving to AI. So my background, I used to work at Amazon, so I know Amazon really well. I used to work at IBM, and it was very interesting. So the number one reason today that people are moving to AI is because of geopolitics. And I'll give you one example. 56% of companies today are looking at moving to tech because of the tariffs. They don't know what's happening. And so because everything's changing so fast and so sporadically, people don't know what's happening, what they're doing is they're hoping to use AI to be able to more autonomously make decisions, understand what's happening faster so they can get what's going on. Sorry? Yeah. And so I thought that was really quite interesting that geopolitics is really now driving the move to a lot of technologies. And as you're looking at technology, obviously trust is really important. But what we looked at was for a successful AI project, what was really the drivers? And so in our study, we surveyed 1,500 companies. Of those, 20% were successful. I know MIT did one with 95% unsuccessful, 5% successful. For us, we had 20% successful. And all of those successful companies had three commonalities to them. One was that they had really good, solid data. They could trust the data. And, everything that you do today has to be based on data. Again, if you look at the numbers, every $2 you spend on AI, you're going to spend $2.50 on your data. So let's $2 you spend on AI, $2.50 on your data. So data is number one, with geopolitics pushing you to that tech. Number two was that it wasn't a tech project. It is a business project. So you're responding to tariffs. You're upgrading your marketing. So you're doing that, and you're applying AI to help you in that task. You're not just doing an AI project. And I led a roundtable with CEOs yesterday, and I said, what are you most surprised about? And they said, well, I'm most surprised that my team's saying, I've got to do an AI project because my CEO wants me to do an AI project. And they're like, that's not what we want. We want the business first. We don't want the tech first. And then the third thing that all these successful projects had was change management. So today, with everything happening, all the uncertainty, everything happening, including your people in a technology project is super, super important. And probably one of the most important things are the humans. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine was working with a company in Malaysia, and they were rolling out a mood jacket. You guys remember mood rings? Yeah? So this is a mood jacket. And the CEO of the company, of the manufacturing company, wanted these mood jackets because he felt like the workers on the floor weren't getting the right support that they needed. It was too hot. It was too cold. They weren't getting enough breaks. They were getting too many breaks. I mean, he was worried about that. And so his goal was to do something that was anonymous, so that no one knew, anonymity of the data. And he wanted to collect information and then respond instantly using IoT and AI. But they spent 9 months training the machine learning models to get the jacket to work. And guess how long they spent on change management with the people? Anyone guess? A week. A week, you got it. You must have been there. And so what happened with a week, the best managers told their teams, this is anonymous, this is not going to hurt you, this is for your good. We're going to pump up music, we're going to give you more breaks, we're going to change the temperature. And those teams did really well, but there were only 3 of those. And none of the other teams would wear the jacket. Why? Because they thought that they were monitoring them and it was going to be about productivity, so they refused. So the company had to start all over again because they forgot the most important thing, which was the people.
Yeah, and this leads perfectly to the points I wanted to make, which is also trust as the foundation for teams to work with, for employees to feel empowered to actually explore ethical data sourcing and having reliable data and mechanisms so that people do not feel taken advantage of. In my field, I'm a neuroscientist, so we are trying to employ machine learning and AI algorithms to predict changes in physiology and changes in the brain and the unconsciousness, because every patient undergoing surgery and anesthesia is in a reversible coma. So we are trying to predict what's going on in the brain under unconsciousness and to pick up on the physiologic changes before they even happen to prevent harm. And so trust to work with teams, it also entails consistency, feasibility, fairness. And I think this is really the foundation. And then leadership, I think it's really important to bring all the different stakeholders to the table that are involved. So not only the physician or the researcher, but also the policymakers, and then the people who are actually going to work on the data. So, and there are a lot of moving pieces, which is not always easy to reconcile, but I think trust is really the foundation.
I think it's important to talk about what kind of leadership in what phase of which kind of entity. Right? Is your leadership role mostly visionary? If you're the CEO of IBM, you're maybe not hands-on managing teams. So it takes, not that you don't want to have many of the same qualities, but what the skills you need in that effectiveness, I would argue, are slightly different. But overall, I agree. I think everything is about the people. And you start, one thing I would say to everybody is get involved in the hiring. If you've become too senior and you've outsourced the hiring to the political layers and the bureaucracy of your organization, or God forbid, some outside service, no, that's even more impersonal. That's looking at flat things, not people. I'd spend the money not on that 9 months of making the mood jacket, I'd spend more time on a high-touch hiring process for you to get the best thing. And then once you have great people, trust them. Let them do their work. Let them have cycles of where everything doesn't have to be. But create a safe environment. It doesn't have to be touchy-feely, but they can express ideas. And one of the things that I'm sure all of you have experimented with every meeting structure. Right? Anybody who talks about corporate life, it's number one thing we all hate is too many meetings about meetings. But most meetings are not very well planned, and they have no provision, or they generally don't have a provision for getting the feedback of the introverts. It's always the same 3 people. And so there are specific things that you can implement that, particularly if you're in the tech side, you probably have a lot of introverts in your extended teams and have not figured out great ways to let them express their thinking. So I'll leave it there so we can pass it on down.
Thank you very much. I agree with what you have said. I think that you were mentioning trust is fundamental. We also ran a study in Europe interviewing more than 300 companies regarding the use of AI at the board level. And there were a lot of things that were confirmations about what we've been thinking, and others were really surprising, answers. The ones that were very surprising is that sometimes at the board level, we think that we know more than we know. And this sense of humility for those that we are not technicians, in that sense, neither engineers, I think is going back to fundamentals, to basics, to the human being, in the sense to understand why we are doing the things and for what. And those are the questions that I think that this study shows that at the board level we should be asking. Also, in order to avoid future responsibility for the use of this technology in this geopolitical world. And because when we ask the right question, we will be able to find the right answers and to avoid entering into this type of tech washing, digital washing, as it has been happening many years ago with the greenwashing. No? And sustainability is good to use technology, it's good to be sustainable, but we need at the end to be able to ask ourselves as a board level the right questions in order to find the right people to join the board. And that my point was to say that I agree that it has not to be just old people, young people, senior people. It's a mix of all of them and from different backgrounds. And the right people have with the right skills. And for me, those skills could be summarized in 3 things, which is people that are able to listen to themselves, because the only way to listen to others, which is the second skills, is when you first listen to yourself. You know yourself, you know why, you are like being a member of a board at a certain point of your life in a company, and having the humility sometimes to say it, to step back if you are not ready. Second, to listen to others. And third, to listen to the world. And by that, I mean this geopolitical, perspective. And I think that's the right order that at a board level, from a leadership perspective, we should be working on us, having the capability to listen to others much more than we do, because there is a really lack of listening to what's really what we are doing, or how can we adapt. I think has been said also at the beginning. No, right now we need to take decisions every day, and being silent right now is taking a decision also. So that's a responsibility, and being able to listen to the world without judging it in a way. And I think that's the real leadership from a board perspective in the world that we are living.
Let me. I think everything my fellow panelists have said is really important. It's kind of the fabric of it. And like Sandy, I also was at Amazon and saw the system thinking that drives behavior. I'm a cognitive and computational neuroscience by training, and so that mix of biology and incentives, all these things are important. But let me leave you with one thought. Like, there's an underlying realism to us being human beings, which is context matters the most, right? And if you think about yourselves, like when you're in the most stressed positions of your life and someone cuts you off in traffic, you hunt that person down, right? But if you're calm and you're happy and someone cuts you off in traffic, you let it go. Why is that? Same circumstance, same inputs, completely different reactions, right? And so what my fellow panelists are getting at, this idea of trust, of listening, of thinking about systems thinking and mechanisms, there's a reality that we're human beings and we're driven by emotions. And a lot of these emotions are set by the context that's set around us. And so as leaders, and as a board member in particular, I look for those hidden signals of what kind of context is being set at a company. What is the environment of that business? Because if you can point to really healthy contextual setting, a leader who tells the business units why we're going in a certain direction, right? A leader that includes the employees as part of the team, not as workers, right? A leader who is thinking about the environment in which everyone works. This idea of mood jackets is maybe a way to do it, but really, at the end of the day, it's about like what is the contextual framework of which we as a team all operate under. Because a great contextual framework leads to a great environment, leads to people who are able to give this really important word, grace, to one another, right? And in your own personal lives, those moments where you have the capacity to give grace is when really magical things happen. And what we're seeing in our country is moments of poor grace. And so you can see, like in the real world, how that is impacting geopolitics, how it's impacting leadership, how it's impacting productivity, how it's impacting the adoption and use cases of AI. And again, coming back to what Sandy said, like it is people because we're all humans. So I challenge all of you as leaders to think about that as well, because trust relies on context, grace relies on context, and frankly, productivity at the end of the day is driven by whether or not the people in your organization are willing to work together.
That's beautiful. I love the focus on context and people. It's what I'm hearing here and what we see in Davos is geopolitics driving the need to make faster, better decisions, driving AI, which we hope is going to be helpful on many and sundry levels. And as we move forward on these things, I keep hearing people talk about trust in technology, trust in AI, trust in machines. And I think what we're hearing in this group is we have to remember to also work on our relationships and create safe spaces. So many board members maybe are frightened, and you have the Dunning-Kruger effect, where the more you know, the more you doubt yourself. And we need to be able to have Chatham House rules meetings where you can ask questions and educate yourself. And in the process, you actually can build better relationships with your leadership's teams and your boards, being able to learn together on these things. And that also helps push together better strategy shared as a group. So I'm going to, as we wrap up, if each of you can say, what is one thing that you would recommend for people that maybe isn't obvious, but as we move into new geopolitical territory, shall we say, might be necessary in the new age that we're moving into? Mine would be creating safe spaces for people to learn from each other and not try and do it all in large meetings.
Wow, that's tough to follow on, and I hear adhere to that. Mine would be if I only pick one, but there's actually many coming up in my head. But the top one would be beginner's mindset, and I'll expand a tiny little bit on that. Beginner's mindset as giving an example throughout the organization of daring to question your assumptions, and it's very much related because if you don't have this first condition of the safe spaces, it's harder, right? There will be the need to make many more bets much faster. It's just a fact. And so to do that well, you need to be able to question your assumptions. And the hardest thing is that people that reach boards often have high qualifications, a lot of experience, and experience is kind of the counterweight of that beginner mindset kind of thing of daring to question your assumptions. We actually had a whole set of exercises, specifically when we were working with top management into figuring out what is your longer-term strategy, in first zooming in, what is a couple of the deeply held beliefs, the assumptions that you might want to question, because you can't question all of them at the same time. You need some basis. And then how do you question them? What's the alternative? Could that be changing, right? And I'll give you one very concrete example, which I believe, again, is part of this. Organizations will have to flatten. So many people that are in boards today think, oh, but it's the only way to do it. 1 in 10, you can only do that. Well, NVIDIA is showing that you can have hundreds of people directly reporting into you. And I think that's going to be a trend. Very flat organizations with as little hierarchy as possible.
That's great.
So.
Thank you.
So when I think about the world that is coming, which is AI, I just ask us to stop and think about just a couple of things. So a lot of people, I'll see a lot of my younger employees, I'll ask them a question and they'll give me an answer and I'll go, but why do you think that? Oh, AI told me that. And I'm like, yeah, but what do you think? Like, what do you think about it? So this is a new fact that I learned while I was here at Davos. LLMs are only trained on 15% of information. Why is that? Only 15% of information today is digitized. Some argue even less, 15%. So what does that mean? That means that the LLMs are not trained on 85%. Think about your culture, not in an LLM. Think about your intuition, not in an LLM. Think about your judgment, not in an LLM. So I'm hoping that I want us to all use AI, but I don't want us to just depend upon it without understanding what it represents. And there was a new report that was just published yesterday. I'm also a Forbes contributor, and so I get all this really cool information. Very sad. So the next generation coming into the workforce that have just started, 82% of them said they would prefer an AI boss. They surveyed 20,000 people. 82% said they would prefer an AI boss. That's heartbreaking to me. And when asked why, the reason they gave was that an AI boss would be fairer, neutral, not political, not play games, and, but probably most important, will allow me to work from home because they're working from their home. So that's what I'd ask you to remember is I'm focused on the human element. I wrote a best-selling book called AI First, Human Always. And I just want us to remember that we humans still have a lot to do. LLMs, 15%. We got to convince that next generation that they want us as bosses because we are fair. We are going to coach them. We are going to give them that context. And that, for me, is the future.
Thank you.
I'll make it quick. I think critical thinking, but also to develop the ability to make good decisions under uncertainty. And what do I mean? I can give an example from the Trauma Bay area that you can transport to your own situations. When I'm working as a physician and we see somebody coming in a critical situation, maybe hemodynamically unstable, might code in a few minutes, we have to make a lot of assumptions. We do see the patient and we have to make very quick assessments of where is the patient in this particular moment. What can we do? How do we prioritize? What needs to be done first? How do we save first what kills? How do we prevent to save the patient from what kills them first? And then we do a secondary survey, and then we constantly reiterate the process and see, what else has changed? How can we improve our situation? And I think this really translates to our everyday decision making and certainly also to the decision making in the board.
Since it's the topic du jour, AI is a tool. You don't lead AI. You manage it, you use it, it hopefully gets more and more reliable in terms of the thing you're asking it to do. But particularly in the changing context of geopolitical volatility, the decisions, the reaction to the information and the external factors are things you decide with your people. So an example would be, the submarine captain. he or she has a tremendous amount of very fast, best possible data in the world, still a person who has to make the decision to go fire or to go rescue. And not that it's life and death, and hopefully in most of your companies, but cultivating those skills for your teams to react, give you the best possible diversity of thought in stressful, uneven times, have them group and regroup in different ways so that they don't assume static roles within those kind of roundtables. That will help you ride out this kind of era of craziness.
Following in a way your idea, when I was listening to Catherine's question, I was thinking in two words. For me was first vulnerability and second safety. Why? Because I think the way to run that with people and the combination between AI and people is when from the top we are able to show what we know, what we don't know, and to be able to recognize our limits and to ask for help. And I think that's something that needs to go from the top down. And this is a question of vulnerability because we are all afraid of being vulnerable. And what I've seen in companies and during my whole career within very difficult situations, in mediations, what really works in order to create the best from the people that you have is when you are able to create an environment of safety. Normally, people tend to feel unsafe, to be afraid. Maybe if I say that I don't know, maybe if I'm giving that opinion, maybe what could happen. And this together with this uncertainty, with also taking into account that we don't know what is behind AI. Sometimes we think that it's more, sometimes think that with less, and we could be confused. We need to create those type of environments when you put this vulnerability from the top leadership down in order to be able to make people open and to give their best in every situation. And it was coming to my mind a book which is called Creativity of Ed Catmull that were implementing, those techniques for being able to obtain always, the best people for each situation, not believing that, having been successful means that we will continue to be successful. So always relying that having doubts is good, and that we need to understand that having doubts is good, and just to establish that we need to have the best people for every situation in order to ask the right questions. And for that, we need to be able to create an environment without, making people to feel afraid. Because as you say before, at the end, we are working with machines, but this is back again to basic. We are all human, treating with human, having to deal with human, and having to face human consequences if we are wrong.
Yeah, I think my fellow panelists have done a pretty amazing job. In moments of crazy change, I think it's really important to go back to what are the fundamental truths, right? This idea of first principles or kind of beginner's mindset. But let me leave you with one kind of macro thought, right? Culture is not statements. Culture is not missions. Culture is what you do, right? And so what is actually being done on the ground, how you reward behavior, what you actually incentivize, please don't forget that what gets rewarded gets reinforced. So of all the things that you could think about that we've been talking about up here, please remember that it's all about the actions that are being taken. People are smart. They see what goes on, right? Think about all of these tropes that are in mission statements and value statements that get snickered at all across companies all over the world. Why? It's because the people actually understand that, yeah, that's pretty. It's not actually what happens here, right? So you actually have to think about very deeply, what are you doing on a day-to-day basis? And how are you actually rewarding and incentivizing people? Because it goes well beyond trust each other, right? It goes to what actually is happening on the ground. That comes, by the way, from all of us. I know all of us agree with this statement because we've all seen it break in all of our organizations, respectively. But the places that have figured out that the actions are the only thing that matter at the end of the day are the ones that actually perform better than others.
Let me add one more thing here. You mentioned culture. I think culture is such an important part, especially when you work in different environments or you change the place and you start working somewhere else. I've done that 4 times, from Berlin to Zurich to New York and then Boston. I was always in academia and very competitive environments. And it is amazing how big of an impact culture actually has. And one thing is resistance to change. There's a book, I think, with the same topic that we analyzed a little bit back in the days at the Kennedy School, Harvard Kennedy School. And it is so interesting because people rarely fear good change. What they usually fear is what will be the consequences for them and how can they prevent having a disadvantage because of that change. And so once we understand what are the things that people care about and what are their fears of why they would not like change, I think then we can make much more change.
So what I'm hearing from everyone is that AI is a fantastic advisor, and we still need to keep people as the decision makers. And I've been so impressed getting to know you all. I hope that at some point I'm honored to sort of serve on a board with you at some point. We have just a couple of minutes. Like, does anyone have a really pressing question? Here, let me.
Thanks for the panel for a great conversation. You had your 4 C's, but I heard 2 other C's, which is context and culture.
Which is part of character, yeah.
So is that part of that was my question? You know, are these actually distinct from the 4 C's that you started off your piece?
Sorry.
I'd argue you don't have to be a good person to be a decent leader, right? You can follow best practices. It'd be nice if you're a good person or a nice person, but let's not pretend that they're all going to be. They can still be extremely effective leaders. They can do what they say they'll do, right? They can be clear about the goal setting and what they want from people. There's many things that I think need to be agnostic across personality. And not every company needs to or should or has leadership that is capable of creating a family. People talk a lot in the U.S. about creating that family feeling. That works for some companies. It's a nice idea for others.
And we all know really successful CEOs who aren't necessarily people you want to go have a drink with.
Not warm and fuzzy.
But yeah, no, with the C's that kind of rolled in character, but also culture, also motivation. That I was kind of putting those in together. But yeah, I mean, we could go on and on about all the different things that roll into it. But I want to be respectful of our next panel, and which is taking this a step further. And how do we apply these leadership points that we've talked about into specific board management? And if we can take a quick photograph before we go. I want to thank everyone for coming, and thank you so much to my panelists. This has absolutely been fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you.